Hello, my name is Chuck Wolf. Over the years, I've worked in many different roles, including leading my own leadership consulting company since 1994. I've worked for and with some of the best companies and universities in the world, and have had the opportunity to work with government officials, military organizations, and public and private schools. I'm a leading expert and pioneer in emotional intelligence. Since 2009, I have been a volunteer hosting a radio show I created called The Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel. I really enjoy making a difference in people's lives. The show is on award-winning community radio station, WPKN in Bridgeport, Connecticut. In recent years, Simsbury Community Television has been sharing my shows on their station and on YouTube. My sincere hope is that everyone who watches regularly will learn how to use the emotion roadmap in their own lives by listening to people who call in to get help with challenges at work, home, and in communities. To learn more, go to www.emotionroadmap.com. If you have a comment or question, email me at cjwolf@cjwolf.com. Thank you and enjoy the show. This is Chuck Wolf, and you're listening to The Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. It's a pleasure to be back with you this week. Last week we had a bunch of callers, and I want to thank everybody who tunes in, who listens regularly, for tuning in again. The show, The Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel, is on the air the first and second Wednesdays of each month from 12 noon to 1 p.m. And this is my second time in the new studio. And I like to joke that it feels like a bit like we've gone from the Flintstones to the Jetsons. Anyway, it's all brand new equipment, so we're getting used to that. I'm getting used to that. I guess other people are as well. And one of the things that is interesting and challenging is how to use all the equipment and know exactly what you need to do to answer the phones, to get the switch from studios, because I'm sitting in a different studio than the person, I Messiah, who was just recording before me. I hope you enjoyed his show, as I do each week, that I get a chance to listen. And I want to thank anybody that's a new listener for tuning in as well. I know there are people that love the station, love WPKN, and just on occasion might just be tuning in for the first time when I happen to be on the air. And so I always like to take a few minutes to explain a little bit about the show. But I also feel, since I'm on the air for just a couple hours a week, that if somebody's got something pressing and they'd like to call about, I don't want to wait. I don't want you to wait. So let me give the number out for all of those of you who are regular listeners who want to call and talk to me about things that are on your mind. And I'll explain what the calls can be about in a moment. But since I've been on the air for 13 years, I know there's a lot of people that listen regularly, and I just want to give you the number again and make it easy for you in case you do want to call in. You got something you'd like to chat about. 203-336-9756. 203-336-9756. And I'll be looking for your phone calls. And just hopefully as we get through this hour, we get a chance to talk to some of you. Last week's show, just to give you an idea of what you might call about, I had 3 different callers talking about different things. One was struggling with a commitment that he and his wife had made together. It had something to do with her changing a behavior he wasn't happy about. And he adores her, and it wasn't, but it was something important, not just for her, but it was to him, but it was important to her, he felt, because it had to do with something that wasn't helpful for her health. And he wants to be with her as long as he can. So he asked for how might we use the emotion roadmap to guide him in talking with her about it differently than he had in the past, which has so far had been unsuccessful. And so that was Tom. And Tom, I hope if you're listening that maybe you made some headway with that. And then we had another caller who called in about someone who was in her family who was seemingly on the road to becoming an alcoholic. And that's challenging in so many different ways. And this wasn't struggling with alcoholism herself. This was an adult son, and who was being influenced by his father, who she had been divorced from for some time, and she was trying to maintain some kind of ability to influence and help him to recover and be a healthy, adult who didn't feel the need to engage in alcohol to make his life better somehow. Because obviously it doesn't. But even though, we all have behaviors, I think, not to that degree, hopefully, but we all have behaviors that we'd like to change. We know aren't helpful. We know aren't even rational. And that's part of what the show is about. And the show is about the idea that if we really want sustainable behavior change, positive changes, if we really want to know how to deal with relationship issues, if we really want to manage conflict more effectively, make better decisions, be more productive, know how to be inspirational, know how to influence, all those things are possible if we pay attention to the emotions that we're feeling and others are feeling. And we realize that the emotions we might be experiencing, we're not stuck with. One of the curious things I found over the years, I've been working in this field of emotional intelligence and developing expertise over the years. I've been at this over 20 years now, is that smart people, when they're stuck, they're often stuck because of something to do internally with the emotions that they're experiencing. I mean, I don't know if you're stuck right now. If you can think about any place in your life where you might be feeling a little unbalanced, confused, uncertain. I mean, one obvious example is how the heck do we behave during times of COVID, right? I mean, I can't answer that for you in terms of how you should behave, but I can tell you that people are choosing a wide range of options. And while we already are polarized around a number of things in this country, COVID vaccinations is another one. And we, in some cases, want to say anybody who doesn't get a vaccine is not only selfish and insane in our minds, perhaps, but they're hurting other people. They can possibly infect other people. So that's the selfish part of it. So while I recognize the right to individual choice, I don't accept that you don't get vaccinated. And so we get people on that side of it. And then we get other people saying, you know what, it's my body, it's my choice. I'm going to roll the dice here, and I think that I'm better off without the vaccine. Now, again, I personally, I believe it's not smart not to get the vaccination. That's my own personal view. But I don't hate people who don't choose to do this, and I don't demonize them. And I've seen others do that. So again, we have so many things that we can be polarized about. So obviously, there's a lot of emotion tied to that. Right. But so much of life isn't about COVID. It's about all kinds of other things. It's about the dynamics inside our families. We've got holidays coming up. Holidays are supposed to be a spiritual, uplifting, wonderful time for families to share what they're grateful for, what they're joyous about, to be together in case they've had to be apart for a long period of time or for any time. It's just a chance to come together. So when I say all that, I think about it and I think, what can we do? How can we help people, have better relationships, deal with challenging situations, whether it's COVID or some personal issue in their homes or something at work where, for whatever reason, maybe you're not happy with the person you report to. Perhaps you were hoping for a raise this year and it didn't happen. Perhaps you got laid off, or you're looking for a job and can't find one. Well, maybe, actually, I think there's lots of jobs out there today. So if you can't find one, you may not be able to find the one that you want, the exact one that you want. But sometimes it's worth getting into a workplace and then perhaps still looking for a job that you want while you are employed. I think it's always helpful in my experience that when somebody's interviewing for another job, the fact that they're working already says that somebody thinks that they're good. But if you've been unemployed for a period of time and haven't had a job, then even if I like you and think you might have the talents and skills that I'm looking for, I'm a little suspect because you haven't been working, and I wonder what that's about, right? So anyway, the idea of trying to be thoughtful and kind and compassionate and empathic, those are all positives that we can take into the holiday season, that we can take into our thought process and our feelings about what's going on in our lives. Well, over the years, I have discovered that sometimes when people are stuck, as many of us are at different points in our lives, even when we're smart, even when we're good critical thinkers, great problem solvers, we get stuck when emotions are involved. So ask yourself, is there anything going on in your life today where you're challenged in a way that you're not certain how to respond? And you're not certain you're going to be able to meet that challenge. Is there anything happening in your life like that? And when there is, ask another question. And that question is, what's going on emotionally around this challenge, around this situation, around where I'm stuck? What am I feeling? And is what I'm feeling helpful? And if it isn't helpful, if it's really not helpful, Is there a better feeling? Is there something else you'd like to feel that would be more conducive to helping you get done what you're trying to achieve? Now, it's a rare person that asks those questions on their own without listening to this show. Until I spent a lot of time learning about the science of emotional intelligence with the pioneers who discovered this whole concept that there's an intelligence about emotions, it took a while to figure out how do we do something that's practical, that takes advantage of what we're learning in that science. And I created what I call an emotion roadmap. So regular listeners know that emotion roadmap kind of works this way. I can take just a moment or two and make it simple to talk about, but it doesn't mean it's simple to do. And that's why I hope if you've listened over the years, this is my 13th year. December is the year I'm starting my 13th year. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about starting it in this new studio with new equipment. So it's all really something I'm grateful for. And I hope you are too. I hope you really value the show and you find it meaningful and it's been helpful to you over the years. But again, if you're new and you're just listening, the idea is that I want you to think about situations where you might be stuck. And if you're comfortable calling in and you can get some really good and helpful advice around how to use this emotion roadmap to guide you in dealing with whatever you're facing, I think that'll be helpful to you. And this is how it works. You call in, you tell me a little bit about your situation. You just say a little bit about what's going on. I listen to you. I try to make sure I understand. I kind of repeat back to you my summary of what you're saying. And then I ask you these questions. And it's the same questions. And I emphasize different questions different times depending on the person and the situation. But the questions are this. Okay, so now that I understand your situation, how are you feeling? What is your current feeling about what's going on? And is there anyone else involved? Or is this just something internal inside you? Because sometimes our conflicts aren't with other people. Our challenges aren't with other people. They're inside ourselves. That makes sense? I'm sure it does to most of you. So as you're thinking about that, what challenges are going on for you? If it's more than you, if it's not just you, I'll ask you, well, who else is key to what you're feeling? For instance, I do a lot of leadership coaching with executives, and I was talking to an executive the other day, and the person was trying to understand how to approach her, the chief executive in her organization, about something that was really problematic. The chief executive was, having some issues around being attentive to the people on the team, her peers and herself, because he was consumed by things that were happening externally. And I won't get into the specifics because it's private conversations, but I just want to say she needed to be able to go in and understand how to approach him. So, because she was very supportive and they have a great relationship, but she didn't want to be critical and harsh. She wanted to be compassionate and understanding that, okay, I understand you got a lot of pressures on the outside about some external things, but you can't lose sight of the stuff that we're doing internally right now, because there's lots of things that are important. Equally as important, perhaps, is what's going on outside. Well, as we talked about it, it occurred to me that who's key in this is, of course, this person, the chief executive, and the person I'm talking to. Well, as I'm talking to them, to the woman who is the person that I'm coaching, and I'm talking about the person that she's going to interact with later in the day, I asked her, one of the things we want to think about is, like, we know who's key. That's obvious. That's you and him and your peers who are feeling some of the repercussions of his inattentiveness right now because he's consumed by things on the outside. But I wonder if there are specific people on the outside that are causing extreme pressure for him. And they're key too. So if he's going to somehow devote more time internally or find a way to make everybody feel okay about what's going on anyway, what does he say or do with the person outside that he is feeling pressure from? So in other words, sometimes people are really obvious who are key, and other times they're sort of invisible. They're behind a wall we can't see. But you want to make sure that you're really thinking about all the people that are key. Because if you're going to help him, you got to understand what he's dealing with. And somebody he's dealing with, he has to figure out a way to make sure he's okay if he takes a little bit of time and spends more time internally with the people inside who have got all kinds of other really critical things going on. I hope that makes some sense to you again. So the idea of this emotion roadmap is first understanding who's key and what is each key person feeling. The second question is, what do you do? What do you do when you've got a feeling that you're currently feeling and the person or people that you're dealing with that are key are feeling, and they're not the right feelings? And what I mean by that is the feelings you're having they're very real. I'm not saying your feelings aren't real and that you can ignore them, but what they might be is real and not helpful. And if they're not helpful, is there some way to change them? And you're not just going to change them arbitrarily to just the random feelings. You want to think about what would be ideal to feel right here? What would be ideal to feel right here? And in thinking about that, the conversation and the one I was just relating to is both parties would have to feel, in terms of the conversation that this person was going to have with her boss, was simply they both needed to feel supported and understood and compassionate and confident in going forward. Supported, they needed to feel supported by each other. They needed to feel understood by each other, why behavior was the way it was and what's causing it. And compassionate, that understood why certain things are happening the way they are, even though they're problematic, understand why they need to be a problem right now, and confident that they got a way of dealing with it, right? So those are all the good feelings that you want to have coming out of the conversation. Well, you might not get there in one conversation, but you want to at least go in with that plan that this is emotionally where I want to go. So you have a current feeling state and a future feeling state. The current feeling state is anxiety, disappointment, kind of, in some cases even a problem where it might be disrespect if somebody's trying to talk to the boss and the boss isn't really listening. That feels disrespectful, doesn't it? And yet if the boss is consumed by something that matters to all of us, but doesn't feel comfortable talking about it, it doesn't look good, doesn't feel good, and it works to disrupt morale. And so you want to somehow find ways to clean that up, right? Okay. So anyway, so that's just something about, how it works in the workplace. In homes, sometimes you got your children, you've got your kids, you've got your spouses, your partners, your in-laws, your outlaws. and now we've got all kinds of people coming together in families, right, for the Christmas holidays. At the same time, I think I just heard this morning that the numbers of infection in Connecticut are somewhere around 8% or higher. Wow, that's pretty wild when we were hoping and wanted to believe that the pandemic was sort of slowing down and wasn't as harmful or dangerous. And by the way, it doesn't, I don't want to try to tell everybody, go get vaccinated because you're crazy if you're not. But most of the evidence that I'm hearing about and seeing is that the people who get real sick, should they get COVID, are not the breakthrough cases of people who are vaccinated. There's still people getting sick who are vaccinated. But for the most part, they get better quicker, and they don't end up in the hospital, and far less of them die. Whereas the people that are unvaccinated really run the risk of hospital, really long-term, the long-term COVID impact, and also hospitalization and death. So I get it that everybody's free to make their own choices, but I encourage everybody out there to get the vaccine. I mean, again, I'm not judging anybody. I'm just saying I think it's the smarter thing to do. Okay, Ed, if you get something that you think you want to talk about around either something to do with the holidays, something to do with families, something to do with the workplace, something to do with you and what's going on for you, give me a call and I'll give you the number again. It's 203-336-9756. 203-336-9756. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you. It's always fun. More fun for me if I've got a call. If not, I'd love to talk with people a little bit about the New England Patriots. For those of you that don't know, haven't listened to the show, I'm originally from the Boston area. I spent all my growing up years there, and I'm a diehard Boston sports fan. And I love the Patriots and the Red Sox and the Celtics. Celtics are a little hard to love these days, but I'm a big fan, and I'll probably always be a fan for all three of those teams anyway. And I'll certainly be happy to talk a little bit about what's going on emotionally in the New England area with sports fans and with the New England Patriots, because it's a really exciting story, I think, if you don't know about it. Okay. Let's see. Hi, you're on the. This is Chuck. Can I ask who you are, please?
Yeah, my name is Rich. I'm calling from Brookhaven in Long Island.
Hi, Rich. Thanks for the phone call. How can I help you today?
Well, I have a couple of challenging questions for you.
Sure.
And I think the second one, I have a feeling there may be just no answer for it and like that. But I think it's a little challenging and maybe a bit disturbing. So I figure it's, a worthy thing to talk about. The first one, I think, will be probably pretty easy. I work on a high-pressure job. I've had the same job for 44 years, well-paid and working with computers and high-tech and, very prominent customers like, Reuters and BBC and hospitals, police departments, and all of that stuff.
Okay.
And so I get, call. I work for a high-tech company, and, you have to troubleshoot stuff at all hours of the day and night and like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I work with a number of guys, and the union I'm in actually is quite, you might say, it sounds strange, is powerful, actually. So I guess my take on a lot of the things in life is that I guess the workers produce the wealth, and then the 1% is there to exploit the people who work. Now, that's maybe kind of an odd perspective, but I find that somehow comforting when it comes to dealing with some of the stresses of living in the corporate world. But like you were saying on your introduction, that things are very polarized nowadays and like that. And so everybody, where I work, the good thing about it is there's an extreme attitude of irreverence. In other words, like we will make jokes about everything and everybody, and kind of let off steam and like that. And regardless of people's political orientation, we do that. I guess we've developed that over the decades as something of necessity. And that definitely works. But as far as politically, sometimes what my weakness, I guess, is being on the sort of Bernie Sanders political left, you might say. I allow my buttons to be pushed, and sometimes with no bosses around and like that, but you get into, I wouldn't quite say it's an argument, but like a conversation that's really not going to lead anywhere because people's perspectives are kind of hardened into reinforced concrete and like that. And I try to say, well, we're all pink on the inside, and listening is a lot better than accusing. And, a lot of the division in this country is set up by big shots who figure if I can divide the poor people, I can screw the people on the left and people on the right to my advantage and all that stuff. So, but I guess I fall into it, like the other day, some of the guys were talking and they were kind of, quoting like what Donald Trump said, which is that if the Democrats win an election, it's fixed. If the Republicans win any election, it's legitimate. Okay. Now, that sort of thing is, and these guys are college educated, family orientated, model citizens and all that stuff, and they really believe it. So I looked into a little bit, and per Gallup polls, 40% of the American public believes that. And I find that terrifying because that sort of sets up a situation like in, and I hope I'm not being alarmist, like in Nazi Germany, where you had people, just blindly following a leader because they're fearful or they're scared or something like that. So you try to talk about that in a reasonable way, and you absolutely don't get anywhere. So I guess what I'm asking you is how do I develop the strength, the moxie, or whatever it is, to, when people talk about things like that, just to ignore that and either steer the conversation onto baseball or weather or, what they're doing with their son who's on the hockey team or whatever, and not get into stuff that's just going down a rabbit hole, while at the same time my conscience is saying to me, is this Weimar Germany in 1929?
So I think let me try and answer it in a general way. First of all,
yeah.
So
yeah.
I actually had somebody on the air asking me a sort of a similar question. It wasn't quite framed the same way as what you just said, but the way he framed it was he said, there are these toxic discussions that take place in the workplace that I'm in, and I really like the guys I work with. I really like the job that I have, and so, but every once in a while I get caught and I engage in it, and I don't see it the same way as many of the others do, and it just never goes anywhere good. So that's one issue. And I said, well, okay, so let me give you some perspective on that. So, and I'll do the same for you. So one of the ways I think about this is, and this is really, it's interesting because I was just talking with a friend of mine this morning about this. Years ago, I heard somebody who's a comedian say something that just has stuck with me, and it's great advice for this, but other situations as well. The fellow's name is Craig Ferguson. He's a Scottish guy, and he's been in America for a number of years. He's had a number of late night shows and other talk shows, and he hosted recently a game show of some kind. But anyway, what he said was, there's a couple things I think are really important anytime you're dealing in what could be a volatile discussion of some kind, where it could erupt into a problem, escalate in some way. He said, the first thing I ask myself is, does this really need to be said? In other words, what he's thinking about saying. And the second thing he says, does it need to be said by me? And the third question is, does it need to be said by me now?
Oh boy, let me write that down. That is good. Okay, does it need to be said? Need to be said by me? Does it need to be said now? Okay, what was the other one?
But does it need to be said by me now?
Does it need to be said now? Does it need to be said by me now? Oh, that's brilliant.
And then he ended it by saying, "It took me 3 marriages to learn that."
Okay.
So this isn't just about politics, but part of what I wanted to share with you is that I think as soon as you start asking yourself those questions, you know you probably shouldn't be saying something. And one of the ways I kind of frame this for myself, and I'm usually pretty good about it. Every once in a while, somebody says something, I just feel like I need to, and if I catch myself, I'll ask those 3 questions, and I don't say it.
I hear you. Oh, that's absolutely brilliant. Okay, that nailed the first one. Okay, the second one, I don't think there's any answer to it. I just think it's the circumstances of modern life. But I just find the circumstances troubling. Okay, we live in let's say a rare thing like a small town, and it's like a middle class thing. It's not like rich people. It's not like poor people. It's actually middle class people, and they have. I know I'm generalizing, but I think in this case it probably works. Most of the people, I think, in our area have a very American dream sort of thing. And I'm more for George Carlin saying, you believe in the American dream, you have to be asleep. But the point is that with the idea of whatever happens to you in life is 110% personal responsibility. It's on you, and if you fail or if you're poor and you turn for help and you have nonprofits or situations that say, we can give you food for a week, and after that you can't come back here for 5 years or something like that, and everything is time limited and like that. And what's happened in our area over the past, I'd say, 10 years or so, is there's maybe been half a dozen occurrences of people who retired, and it was either a single person or a couple or a married couple or you might say a bonded pair of people together and like that. But what it boiled down to is they maybe got, laid off from their job at 70 and they couldn't get another job and like that. And even with Social Security or whatever, they had maybe 70% of what it took to keep the wolf away from the door, basically. And within about a year or two and like that, things were kind of going south little by little, although the person would not say anything about it and kept up appearances very well. And then maybe 2-3 years down the road, they would kill themselves. And so, this now, what was going on in their head, I don't know. Was it related to that? I have a feeling it was, or that was a contributing thing to it. And these people were not stupid, as far as planning, as far as I know, as far as, planning things or whatever, or reaching out to people or organizations or whatever. But, I just find it kind of distressing that I guess the social safety net and the social contract, or whatever you want to call it, is so frayed or non-existent that people would just shrug their shoulders when something like that happens and accept it as the new normal, whereas it bothers me.
So I can sort of talk about what happens to people and why they might do that. Is there a question you're asking about this, though? You said it's a question. I'm not sure. It's
well,
go ahead.
Yeah, basically, I guess the question I have is that, I'm not sure that in their circumstances, maybe that was the most rational decision they could make. But as far as I can tell, things didn't quite used to be like that. That, more people had enough to live in their declining years. I'm not saying every single person, but it was like, especially in the middle class and like that. And to see that as kind of a solution. And again, I'm not inside that person's head. I don't know. I'm speculating a certain amount. But I bet if it happens in our community, I bet it's happening elsewhere too.
Sure.
And I just think it's kind of sad. And I guess as a community, I don't know what you can do. You know what I mean? Or maybe you can't do anything about it. Maybe that's just the way things are.
Well, I think there are organizations that try to do something about it. But I think you said a couple of things, and I want to tie them together. I think one, you said that personal responsibility is, Carlin or others have also said this, that, a lot of what happens to us in life really is about what we do. I mean, I also want to add, my brother always says this to me, it's better to be lucky in life than anything else. So I think there's a little bit of that in there. It isn't just personal responsibility. Some people just seem to have the worst things happen to them. But having said that, I think it has a lot to do with the attitudes that we grow up with, and also there's been a lot of research on happiness in recent years, and I think the way we define happiness is really interesting, because I just had an uncle pass away, and he didn't have much. When you say these people that only have a certain amount they don't have the same standard of living perhaps that they've had because they didn't necessarily save or whatever's going on financially for them.
Or maybe they couldn't. Yeah.
Well, but my uncle never mattered to him.
Yeah.
I mean, and he taught me so much about life. He was one of the guys that would call on my birthday. It was my only uncle that ever called me every birthday that I had or certain holidays. And he was somebody who I just adored the man. And he had such a sort of joie de vivre, if you will, just an attitude towards everyone in life that he met. And he just was, who are you? How can I help you? And even though I don't have much, whatever I got, I'm going to try and help you with it. And so many people feel like I don't have enough.
Yeah.
So I think part of this is not just personal responsibility, but the attitude you bring with you.
Apropos of that, I remember when I was a kid, my dad was a mechanic for Eastern Airlines, and he would get a pass, and he would take the family up to Montreal for a day, and we'd take the Gray Line bus around Montreal and see that, and then go to a sidewalk cafe like you would have in France, and they would be all up and down the street and like that. And I'll never forget it. One day, my dad was he could speak a number of languages, so he was listening. He couldn't help but hear about another conversation. So I must have been about 12 or 13 or something, and he seemed interested in that. We're sitting there having a Perrier wine, not me a Perrier wine, but like a glass of water, whatever. But it was just amazing seeing people on the street, no waiters bothering them, sit down, and just the whole community out there talking about all sorts of things. And so I said, well, what did you hear? And he said, well, I heard that this fellow died, and he must have been around 51. But the thing was, without being irresponsible, it sounded like the people were saying he enjoyed every minute of it. Like he ate a lot of interesting things. He did a lot of interesting music. He did a lot of this. He did a lot of that. So he really lived life to the hilt. So, and then they were talking about this other person who lived to about 97, and they always ate healthy, and they always went to the doctor on time, and they were always in plenty of time whenever they were catching a plane and like that, and they always obeyed every law and like that. And then one of the persons commented, she said, well, if you obey all the rules, you miss out on all the fun. And so, but their point was, and then they were saying about the person who lived to 97, and the people said, oh, how sad. Whereas the person who was 51 and like that, they said, wow, that person had a great life. So maybe that was the Gallic or the French approach to it, but I thought that kind of ties into what you're saying.
Yeah, it does. It's more about what you do. I couldn't help but think. One time I had this thought about the mayfly. I think it is. It has like a 24-hour life cycle. They're born, they have sex all day long, and then they die.
Okay.
But part of me is just kind of, in some ways, is what do you do with your life? And let me say this to you too, Rich. One of the things I'm thinking about is when you first talked about who you are, you said you talked very, very. You're a strong advocate for what you do. I think you really enjoy it. You get this group of people you really enjoy, you have fun with. Every once in a while, it goes off the rails because you've got a Bernie Sanders approach, and not everybody's on board with that. But mostly, I think you want to think, too, when you're not there, what's there for you? I mean, part of this is like for people that love what they do and really enjoy where they've been, and you take a lot of pride in it, when it's over, and that's, I think, it isn't always about the money. I think when people, decide they don't want to go on anymore, is they don't feel there's a purpose.
Right.
So I think it's really critical for people. I mean, for me, I could have retired a number of years ago. I do this radio show as a volunteer because I'm good at it. I help people and I make a difference, and it's purposeful for me.
Right. I hear you.
So I think you want to really be, and everybody's listening, to think about, so when the time comes for me to do something different, what does that look like? And what do I really envision for myself? What is the best version of me when I'm not here?
Well, the two things I'm thinking of, like with my wife and like that, one, when I retire, one is to learn a foreign language, like maybe where you would go with a group of people, and when you know enough, like you have to speak that language. You go out for dinner, and that's one thing. And then the other thing is to give back a little bit, like, helping a kid with their homework in the library or something like that.
Something like that, Well, I think both of those could be worthwhile. And maybe something else. I mean, I think you want to have several things. And I think if you plug into a group, I'm very active actually in politics, and I work to try to bring people together. And also, I'll leave you with one other thing, by the way, because the earlier part of your conversation. There's a group called Braver Angels.
Okay.
Has grown enormously over the last number of years, and what they do is it's really interesting. It was based on a marital relationships counselor. Who had this vision of people in marriage often have problems, but if I can find ways for them to talk to each other, maybe I can save their marriages. Well, he's trying to save the country in this sense, because people who are in what he calls a red mindset versus a blue mindset. And wherever you are in that dynamic, you don't have to be far left and far right. You can be just left or middle left or whatever it is. He said, how do we talk to each other? And they have ongoing workshops. They call them red and blue workshops. And they bring people together who, at the end of these conversations, find real common ground, even though they thought there was no chance for that going into it. So it's another thing that maybe if you have some interest in that, you may want to explore.
Okay.
Yeah, I looked them up. So I think that's worth noting. And finally, I think if you can find a number of things that you can plug in right away, even before you retire, so you have a sense of, if you want to learn a foreign language, that sounds great. But I found that I've known a few people that wanted to do that, and then they got bored with it. It just didn't work, So and maybe that wouldn't be you, but I'm just suggesting pick a few things and try them before you leave.
Right.
So you get something to plug into,
Interesting.
And that's really for everybody, not just for you, just to think about.
Well, some great food for thought. Thank you.
Nice. Thanks for the call. Take care and have a great holiday season.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. Well, that was nice. You want to call in? You still got time. It's I got midway through my show here. The show is The Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. You're listening to Chuck Wolf, and I'm on the air on Wednesdays on WPKN 89.5 FM. According to the New Yorker, we're the best radio station in the world. So what a wonderful article that was this past summer. Just kudos to all those people around me that make this station so great, and to all the volunteers who did so much work to get this station up and running. What a major effort it's been, and how beautiful this place is. Hope you get a chance to come down and see it someday. Anyway, so the show is The Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. The number to call is 203-336 9756. I'm Chuck Wolf. The number again is 203-336-9756. And I've got my next caller. Hi, this is Chuck. You're on the air. Who am I talking to, please?
Chuck, it's Frank. I live in New Haven, and I'm a faithful listener and supporter of PKN, and I appreciate your show. I've heard only tripped across it a number of times because up until recently, I worked full time. And I'm 72 now, and I finally, after 2 years of suggesting that I was overworked and wanted to go at least part-time to my boss, who is a professor, I finally kind of put my foot down and said, okay, now I'm going to do it. Worked incredibly hard over the pandemic in the lab, and, I kind of forced the issue finally. So I'm now part-time, and I've worked my entire life. In fact, starting at age 16, when I started to work in research labs while I was still in high school. And I can't tell you the emotional relief that I felt the first day when I was able to go out and take a bike ride by myself and not have to worry about my work load. And now we've hired a replacement to take over most of my other duties, and I'm basically a consultant while the new person learns the trade, essentially.
Well, Frank, let me stop you just for a second. I just want to say I've got another call I was trying to call in. I just want to say I'm here by myself. So anybody who's calling in and don't get an answer, I apologize. I just can't answer the phone when I'm talking to somebody.
Appreciate it.
Anyway, Frank, thank you for calling in. You sound like you've made a choice and it feels really good to you?
Yes, it feels really good to me. I must say I had great hesitancy about worrying about not having enough to do. I'm kind of a Mr. Fix-It, and I have my fingers in a number of, minor and not tradesman-like repairs, but, stuff I keep occupied with. But I also like to watch birds. I also ride a road bike, fairly long distance, with a friend whom I'm still in contact with, who lives along the Connecticut River. So I'm enjoying my life as so far as it goes, and I hope to retire soon first. But I guess my wife is in the same position. She's just 2-3 years younger than me. She works in the school system in an incredibly demanding environment. She's a specialist, speech and language pathologist, and she feels, as a city girl, she feels like there won't be anything to do. She's certainly not a housewife type a person, and doesn't want anything to do with housekeeping, which is okay with me because I'm the housekeeper here. But I'm trying to convince her that, well, life is short, and I can't seem to do it.
Yeah, it's interesting. So she's in a different place than you emotionally around the workspace, because when she gives up, what has she got? She's wondering.
Yes. And also as a woman, she knows that, at her age, once she lets go, she might not have anything. In other words, she might not be able to gain employment. And fortunately for me, I managed to save up a goodly sum such that we're never in need of work again. And yet she still feels obligated to continue to work just so she has spending money, as if the money that I've saved, which is, hers also, can't be touched. And, the emotional baggage around shared wealth in a middle class setting, especially for one who was brought up by parents who suffered the Great Depression of 1929, is quite a challenge.
Yes, it is. So you've got a couple of things going on. One is you found relief, but also, Frank, you're still working part-time. Are you going to continue that for a while, or is that going to be over pretty soon?
It's an option. I am working at my pleasure and the pleasure of my professor, who said I may stay as long as necessary.
So you've sort of had a really kind of gifted way of,
I am incredibly lucky.
So, and she doesn't necessarily have like a part-time role that she could play and stay engaged in case she wanted to dip her feet back in full-time. I mean, I don't, at 69, there are people that are working, that work until they, until it's over. They love their work so much. The other side of it is I have a daughter in special education, and schools today they're one of the most challenging workplaces of all, I think.
Absolutely. I would not be able to do it. Not at all. So it's emotionally challenged, technically challenged, and basically completely underfunded.
So here's how this. Let me just talk to you a little bit about this idea of an emotion roadmap and how it might be helpful to you with what's going on. I think you want to understand how she's feeling about what's going on in the workplace for her, and how it probably frightens her to think. And I think she can say, "I want to have my own pocket money that I know that I'm earning, not take yours." And but that's more to me an excuse, not a real issue.
I see.
No, I'm not saying I'm right about that, but it just in general.
No, but it's possible. Yes.
Yeah. In general, it's often just a reason why I don't want to let go of, because I'm afraid. I'm afraid to let go in terms of what's going to happen. I can't get back in. And, at 69, if something happens to you and we don't have, it's all, and it's very scary for a lot of people on a lot of levels. And so somehow do you think I'm right about that?
It's a possibility. She's a very anxious person, and this may be. And she's basically worked a lot of her stuff out in therapy and whatnot. But I think this particular subject is not something she's revisited lately, and it sounds like it has some ring of truth.
So then if that feels like it's a possibility, and she's generally anxious anyway, then this is anxiety, to the maximum, with the idea of I'm letting go of the life that I know that I might not like all the time, or even like a lot these days, but it's the life that I know. It's the life I'm comfortable with. It's the life that I'm...
As opposed to the life of tedium at home, not having anything to do.
Well,
is the way she looks at it.
I think
but that's the way she looks at it.
Yeah, and I think it's also, when you say tedium, it's like it doesn't have the same purpose.
Right.
It's not that she wouldn't find things to enjoy. She might enjoy watching TV, reading a book, going for a walk. I mean, there's lots of things that she might enjoy, but it doesn't feel like it has a purpose.
Yes. Yeah. And I wrestled with that too. I mean, how can I give? I'm not a great teacher. I don't have much patience. Although I could, I could volunteer with some public service group or other. I haven't quite found which would be something suitable for me. But, I mean, she could also do something like this. I mean, she does, exercise and meet with friends and et cetera. But she worries that that's not enough. So I'm really focused on her more than me, because I think I can make two. But
so let me ask you, what do you think you'd like for her to feel about being retired and being home with you?
I'd like her to feel like it's okay, and she can just relax and enjoy herself. I guess maybe part of the issue is I'm not essentially, I come from more or less the same upbringing, and am a little anxious myself. And life in a confined space is something that every day life has its challenges too, and maybe she doesn't really want to commit to that all the way. I mean, we've been married for 18 years now, so okay. That's not the issue.
Okay, so you sort of have a feeling of you want her to feel relaxed and that she can enjoy herself and obviously somewhat comfortable, but and meaning less anxious.
Yes, anxious. Anxiety is the key, and I think that's at the root of most of her issues about letting go.
Well, what do you think, because this is the next step in the process, is what do you think would make her feel more comfortable at home and less anxious? I mean, you can say relax and enjoy, but that's not fulfilling enough, I don't think, for her right now. So the anxiety will still be creeping in, because what am I really doing here now? I'm just sitting here and I've read a book now, and I've read 2 books, and I've watched a show, and now I'm wondering, what do I do with the rest of my time? There's a lot of time left, and that's the anxiety creeping back in, right?
Right. And what do I think about it? Well, I don't know what to think about it.
Well, what do you think would help her to feel less anxious if she really was retired? Any idea?
Well, only my continued reassurance that it'll be all right. And we can go on day trips and enjoy our new dog, et cetera, et cetera.
So it's more about what you might do for her, but what can she do for herself in other words, she's then dependent on you. What happens if it's 70 years old, who knows how long?
And I allude to that she'll outlive me, and she knows that too. But
so what can she do for herself, do you think, that's going to make her feel okay no matter what happens?
Yeah, that's the puzzle. That is the puzzle, and I don't have insight.
Can I offer you something that might be helpful? So
sure.
I think it's tough to talk to somebody like your wife in the situation you've described about leaving anytime soon. And I know that you want it to be soon because you're retired now, and who knows how many years we have together. So you'd like to spend them together. I mean, really together, not her just coming home late at night with stuff to do and things that she's upset about from the day. And you'd like it to be better than that. So, but if you ask her, hey, can you retire soon? And that just raises the anxiety level. So if, instead of that, what if you ask her, hey, I don't know when, but at some point, let's say 5 years from now, you'd probably be retired then. What would you like to be doing? In other words, give her the space to think, I don't have to do this right now.
Frame it so that she envisages some or offers some alternatives.
Some vision for herself. In other words, at 5 years from now, hey, let's start talking about, I don't know when it's going to be. I know you want to keep working, and I'm okay with that.
So no pressure.
That's the idea. And then if she allows herself to start to explore what might work, and hopefully and this isn't going to happen in a day or a week, it'll take months, but over several months of conversations about that and just kind of looking forward to it, it'll build a case for her that she doesn't really need to keep going. And I don't mean that she'll retire at the end of this year, but maybe it's the following year, because all of a sudden she starts to get excited about this vision that she felt no pressure to create. But in other words, you see how it might bring her forward?
I see that. Yes. Yeah, that's great. That's very helpful. I'll work on that, and I'll work on it in a very laid back manner.
Yeah, and one of the things that you might ask her is, and what can I do to help make this great for you when you come home? Is there anything I can do to be supportive? Because that's going to help her feel more confident, too, that, she really can trust you to help make this right, whatever happens going forward.
Yes, I hear that. I hear that loud and clear. All right, sir. Well, thank you so much for your insightful program, and I look forward to hearing more of your programs.
Thanks a lot for calling, Frank. Good luck with it.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Have a great holiday season. Bye-bye.
You too.
Bye. Well, that was nice. That was the second show, and two really good calls. I hope everybody got some insight again about how this emotion roadmap works. You really want to focus on the feelings that are in play, and that helps you to create options that just aren't really possible without them. And then there's some techniques when you're looking for some specificity. I love that Craig Ferguson advice. I've given it several times on the radio show. If you didn't happen to hear that, that was just when you're worried about any conversation, politics being one of them. But when you get back together with your family members, which is coming up for Christmas holidays, and I wish everybody a wonderful holiday season, whatever holidays you're celebrating, remember that there's certain topics that are, not that you can't talk about them, but one of the ways you can talk about topics that maybe you are on the other side of an issue of whoever it is that you love, that you're talking to, who has a different opinion, just really listen hard. Try to understand their perspective without being judgmental. I know it's hard, but that's one thing. The other is if you feel like you need to say something because you want to enter the fray and you just feel the need to want to jump in and say what you think is right, ask yourself these questions by Craig Ferguson. 1, does this need to be said? 2, does it need to be said by me? 3, does it need to be said by me now? And if chances are you're going to answer no to at least one of those questions, then don't say it. If you're not going to really change anybody's mind and it's just going to be an up and down, upsetting conversation, don't bother. Enjoy the people you love. Be compassionate with them. Be understanding. Don't be judgmental. Just enjoy and be thankful for the things in your life that you can take great care and pride in. And one of the questions that Rich asked about earlier was, what if you don't have enough? It's really funny about what it means to have enough. And one of the things I'll tell you is my Uncle Haskell Hanna, he taught me that enough is really what's in your head. We almost always have enough. Maybe it's not as much as we'd like, but it's enough. And I hope that's enough for you. And I leave you with that. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye. And thanks for listening.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.